Okay, guys, good morning, folks. And it's chapter 24, and we are headed into the book again. I'll show you what chapter we're in. We'll do a little bit of talk about it. Before I do, I'll make a mention about, some really good responses. I asked a question earlier about inert gas systems, and that goes back a couple of lectures, inert gas systems and also vapor recovery. So that response has come in, and those were really good. I enjoyed reading your work, and I published mine. I put my 110 words or so. I put that short paragraph, my synopsis up there. So why don't you compare what you got there and to what I got? So let's get going, and we'll switch over to the camera, and then we'll come back to the PowerPoint. So I got my notes today, and we're going to be talking about lifting arrangements, chapter 24, and here's my copy of the PowerPoints, and we'll look at more detail on the screen. So when we put that aside, we are, of course, in the textbook, as always, here we are. They're short chapters, so I hope you're keeping up with me. Here's number 24. Cargo lifting arrangements. So we're talking about shipboard, cranes, masts, and Samson posts. Here's a diagram that we'll discuss, this diagram 24.1 of a bulkhead and just why that's important. We'll look at some of this gear here. And I know we looked at that a little bit back in with your teacher back in NS101, Intro to Naughty Sci. And we'll look at some of this stuff here. This is called a heavy lift crane and some of the basics. Maybe we could talk a little bit about heavy lift. It's very short chapter, and I have a couple of good questions for you. So there we go. Let's pause there, and I'll be back in just a few seconds. Well, like I said, we are talking about lifting arrangements. So we're looking at cargo ships here and some different ways that they do it. We had some pretty small pictures, but we can see. And so this is a small vessel. It's got its own cargo gear for lifting whatever it's going to put on. Here's a different rig here. Here's a different rig up here. Here we come coming in. This one's got cranes, or what are sometimes referred to as derricks. And this one has them as well, a little bit unique. And you'll see that this one's actually carrying containers and this one's carrying containers. So as much as we like to put, cargo ships in neat little boxes, I like to talk about container ships, and I like to talk about bulk carriers, and I like to talk about a break bulk ship. We talked a little bit about that and the whole significance of a ship with a tween deck and how that would be carrying that would be known as a break bulk ship. It's hard to tell. I mean, I'm pretty sure that these ones here on the bottom are container ships, since I see containers. This could be a small bulk ship, self-unloading. But it's then again, it could be break bulk, or it could be some combination of either of those. And let's go on to the next diagram. And so here we are, getting ready to talk about this one. Let me make a sort of a beginning statement that goes with this lecture. So let me read this to you. Various devices used for the movement of cargo on and off the vessel. That's really what we're talking about. These are the stuffs that are things that move cargo on and off the vessel. Now, I know, although containerization and ro-ro are widely used transportation methods, the use of ship's cargo gear, and let me go back to that other diagram, the use of the ship having its own cargo gear is still, pretty prevalent, and it's still used on both large and small vessels, as you can see in this diagram. Those container ships, they're not particularly small vessels. They're not giant 1,000-footers, but they are large vessels still. At the very least, we anticipate some type of a lifting device, even on every ship. Obviously on the training ship, we have lifting devices on the training ship, port and starboard. We refer to those as the stores crane up on the weather deck, by the hatch deck. As you come up the gangway, of course, you're familiar with those. And I should tell you that every merchant ship has a stores crane. If it's a container ship, you know, they use their own stores crane to load and discharge the ship's food supply, spare parts, engineering parts, anything like that. There's going to be stores. I'm talking, when I say the word stores, you know, the stuff that the ship needs. And so it's usually a small crane. It might even be smaller than the one we have on the training ship. It might even be a little bit less than that. You know, there's a crane up on the very top. What would that be? The 04 level up on the after deck, and that is an engineering stores crane, which allows them to get stuff up on deck. I don't know if you've seen that used on the TSOM, but it is certainly there. Well, so now let's go back to this. And why is this important? Well, first of all, let's just go kind of check the what's it called here? Our, figure 24.1, stiffening in the way of a mast and a heavy derrick. So we we see a double bottom here, and it's not. I'm gonna think, just by the way this deck is sort of sloped upwards, I'm gonna think that this is forward, and over here this way is aft. So here's a bulkhead which goes up, and notice there is a. Let's see, we got some. We are directly built. That bulkhead is directly built onto one of the floors down in the double bottom. And so this area here would be the lower hold. This would be, well, now this is interesting. This is called the lower tween deck. And this is the upper tween deck. See that right there? Lower tween deck, upper tween deck. I haven't really talked about that much, but some ships have 3 different cargo decks. This structure up here, this is called the kind of a mast house on the main deck. Here's the upper deck here, and this one is up here. It's called the. So at this point, you are out there in the open air, and this is a structure called a mast house. Now this is a British text, so there is always a little bit of change here. And we see that there's the mast, and here is, well, they use the word derrick, a heavy derrick, but this, we would use the word boom, B-O-O-M. But what I want you to notice is that all of these things, the mast, the derrick or the boom, everything which is here, the boom stool, the derrick stool, you know, the base of it, everything is kind of focused on that bulkhead so that the weight or the force or the stress of using that gear, that cargo gear, is all transferred down to the bottom of the ship. Any of you who are sailors, you understand the concept of a mast on a sailboat, and as you get on the larger sailboats, the mast is stepped all the way down through the cabin. If you look at the Bowden, if anybody familiar with the Bowden, the mast is not just doesn't end up on deck, it goes all the way down and it rests on the keel. The strongest, most structural member comes all the way down. Well, the mast doesn't come all the way down, but the scantlings, the structure, comes all the way down that bulkhead, and it transfers that load. So that's where we want to kind of be as we look at that. Now, these are referred to in the textbook as derrick rigs, and we would call those masts and booms. They're very traditional systems. They are more still used. I think I said that already. I looked down at my notes and repeating myself, but if you think back to that first diagram, we see just on this one here, this one here, this one here. That is that system that we're talking about. And those items are still used. And I do remember back in NS101, I think I gave you a test question, very much built sort of looking like this. And even if it wasn't me that you had an NS101, all the instructors were teaching from the same thing. And so you kind of learn the basics of this system. There's a couple of different schematics here, and this one is called a patent derrick or patent cargo gear, and that word patent simply means, as you know it, just the way it is, you know, something that somebody has a special construction, a special way of doing it, and they apply for a patent because they own the technology. And so there is some pretty high technology. When I'm not sure you think of it as high technology, but in the world of cargo operations, these were a different way of doing things. You see that there's a one mast. It's got this big cross tree up here that goes back and forth. And spend a little bit of time in the textbook looking at these different winches and what they might operate, and kind of spend some time putting together. Now let's go over to this one. Notice it's called an 80-ton Stokin Derrick. And here in the middle, this is the boom. This is what moves. You notice these two, which are set kind of like they're splayed outwards. I'm assuming that we're maybe, let's all assume that we're in the bow of the ship, on the bow of the ship. We're looking aft towards this heavy lift. And there might be one cargo hold on the ship, probably somewhere near the middle of the ship, that uses the heavy lift. Particular patent device called a Stokin. Stokin is the name of the company that created these and manufactures them. But what's interesting about it, you see how the mast, or the king post, really, notice how they're sort of angled in, and they both come down to the center line of the vessel. So you think about all the forces that are applied, and it's that same technique or that same thought process that we just talked about, where these masts, although they look like they're going to tip over, that's intentional so that they bring the force down all the way to the bottom here. This is a diagram that you'll probably learn about in more when you get into the cargo seamanship class. And I think some of you are in that seamanship class, and so you may be learning about compression and stress on a boom, and that's what it's trying to show here. It's labeled forces on a single swinging derrick rig, but we do a process called parallelograms of forces. I don't know if they're doing that in seamanship or yet, or if you will, but I'd be pleased to show it to you if you ever want to check in next fall when we're back. Come on into the office and we'll certainly talk about it. And then we switch over to cranes, cargo cranes. And, my question to you, let's see, cross-section of a bulk carrier, so it's not really a question because the answer is right there, with a side-mounted 30-ton, that's the lifting capacity of the crane, a 30-ton crane. So a bulk carrier, and you can see the way the cargo hold is shaped. There's no tween decks, it's just one big cargo hold. A fairly good size hatch opening here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 decks. So this is a ship, probably from the deck up to the wheelhouse, it's 4 or 5 decks. Yeah, about 4 or 5 decks up to the wheelhouse. And so it would be, the size of the state of Maine, maybe even around 600 or 650 feet total. And it is a bulk carrier, and this is how they would unload. And you can imagine some type of a bucket or some type of a gripping device. It wouldn't be a hook, but it would probably be, grapples if you were using scrap steel, or some type of a big, like on the bucket that you would see on a backhoe or an excavator type stuff that could grab the loose bulk cargo down here. There's obviously different types of cargo. Well, I didn't mention it, but we're at 13 minutes and we're getting real close to the end, so I know you're going to like that. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the lecture, and that will show up. It will be it'll be in the discussions for this lecture. This is going to be labeled, I think it's going to be lecture 8. I think that's what it's going to be. That's our online lecture. I'm going to ask you a question here, so check this out. I'm giving you a little bit of time to look at that. So what do you think? What type of ship is that? Looking at it, thinking about what you're seeing here. It's kind of like what we just saw. Pretty interesting. Got some cranes on it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And those cranes can pivot around so they can work the cargo hatch in front of them or behind them. 4 located to the fore side or the aft side. And pretty obvious stuff what's happening there. But I want to point something out to you right here. See these things? I'll start here, and then here, and here, and here, and here, and here. You see them going down the other side as well. What do you think those are? So it's kind of, if I was in class, I'd point at you and I'd say, hey, what do which one? Chris, which one do you think that is? Brian, which one do you think that is? Shannon, which one do you think that is? What type of ship? So I'd have that discussion with you. And but you tell me in the discussion, what you thought it was. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue. We're going to jump this over. I'm going to show you what it looks like when there's cargo on board. Okay. Geez, what are you looking at? What type of ship is that? So you tell me what you thought it was. Tell me what it is, and I'll give you one more clue. If it's not real obvious, it's got something to do with this picture here. By the way, see this object right here, and this one back on this right here. You see what we have? Now I know many of you have been riding on some road in Maine behind one of these things, and you're watching them sort of tip and rock left and right, and you have to pass them because they're maybe going kind of slow. And you're a little nervous that all those things, all those logs might roll off. Let's go back to the original drawing. So these things right here are what hold, all right, get that? They hold the logs in place. See them? They all kind of just like on a truck, on a log carrier. So here's your last question for the day. Who knows what the Golden Road is? Now that's going to identify what part of Maine you come from and what you like to do. So somebody give me a good Golden Road story and share that with everybody in the discussion. And I think, well, in fact, I know I'm all done. So I'm going to say goodbye. And that's the lecture for today. Nice short lecture, 17 minutes. You're in, you're out. Write a comment. Make sure you do the quiz today. Make sure you respond and keeping up with everything, but let's get that glossary quiz. And if you ever have any problems, you need to give me an email or a text. I'm taking both, so be in contact, and take care. And we'll have another video up on Friday. See you later. Bye-bye.